The cardiac monitor screamed a warning just as Colonel Harlan Briggs hurled his untouched breakfast tray across the room, sending scrambled eggs sliding down the pale blue wall of room 412 at the Dwight D. Eisenhower Army Medical Center. "Get that woman out of my sight," he snarled at the orderly frozen in the doorway. "I want someone competent, a man, a real doctor. Not another soft-handed civilian who's never seen anything harder than a paper cut." The orderly, a young specialist named Tillman, backed out of the room so fast he nearly tripped over his own feet. At the nurse's station down the hall, Petra Gaines was already reaching for the incident report form when she heard the crash. She set it back down when she saw Neva Harlow coming around the corner, a medication tray balanced in one hand and a patient chart tucked under her arm. Neva was 31 years old, 5'6", and had the kind of stillness about her that made new residents nervous. She did not rush. She did not raise her voice. She simply moved with the deliberate economy of someone who had learned long ago that panic was a luxury the field did not allow. 412 again? Neva asked, not looking up from the chart. "He threw breakfast," Petra said. "Dr. Sinclair's already said he won't go back in there without security present." The man told him his stethoscope probably cost more than his medical degree was worth. Neva flipped to the second page of Harlan Briggs's chart. Her eyes moved quickly through the vitals, the labs, the attending notes. She paused at the line under military service history. Her finger did not move, but something behind her eyes did. 1st Special Forces Operational Detachment Delta. ODA 525, Mosul, Iraq. 2005-2006. Ramadi, 2006. Kandahar, 2009. She closed the chart. "Draw up the ceftriaxone," she said quietly. "I'll take him." Petra stared at her. Neva. He told the last nurse that her medical license was decorative. Then she should have charged him for interior design. Neva picked up the medication tray. "Get me a fresh IV kit and a size 7 glove pack." She walked down the corridor alone. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. The smell of industrial cleaner and stale cafeteria coffee hung in the air the way it always did at 0730. And Neva moved through it the way she moved through everything. Without flinching, without hurrying, carrying something behind her sternum that nobody on this ward had ever thought to ask about. She did not knock on the door of room 412. She pushed it open with her shoulder, stepped over the scattered remains of Colonel Briggs's breakfast, and set her tray on the rolling table beside his bed. Colonel Harlan Briggs was 64 years old and looked simultaneously older and more dangerous than his age suggested. He sat upright in the hospital bed with the posture of a man who considered lying down a tactical vulnerability. His silver hair was cut so close to his skull it looked painted on. Both of his forearms were wrapped in compression bandages, the left considerably thicker than the right. The legacy of the IED blast in Ramadi that had shattered his ulna and introduced bone fragments that his body had spent 15 years quietly trying to reject. The resulting chronic osteomyelitis had finally won. The infection had spread to his bloodstream 3 days ago. Without aggressive intravenous antibiotics, the attending physician had written in his notes, "Prognosis is extremely poor." The colonel did not look at Neva when she entered. He stared at the wall with the focused hostility of a man who had decided in advance to be unpleasant. "I said I wanted a different nurse," he said. His voice was the texture of gravel under boot soles. "Good morning, Colonel Briggs," Neva said. She did not introduce herself. She pulled on her gloves and began preparing the IV line with the calm efficiency of someone who had done this in worse conditions than a private hospital room. My name is Harlow. I'll be managing your care this shift. Did you hear me? I did. She uncapped the saline flush. You have a gram-positive bacteremia working its way through your system. The ceftriaxone needs to go in now. Give me your right arm. Briggs finally turned to look at her. His eyes were the color of old iron, and they moved over her the way a man reviews terrain, assessing, categorizing, dismissing. How old are you? Old enough. She held out her hand, palm up, waiting for his arm. You look like you went to nursing school last Thursday. He leaned back against his pillow, folding his arms across his chest, with the careful deliberateness of a man managing significant pain without acknowledging it. I'm not letting a child stick a needle in me. Get me somebody who's seen something real. Get me somebody who knows what it means when the clock is actually running. Neva lowered her hand. She looked at him for a long moment. The clock is running right now, Colonel, she said. Your white count this morning was 18,400. Your temperature spiked to 102.8 overnight. If we don't get this medication into your bloodstream in the next 30 minutes, we are talking about ICU transfer and a conversation about central line placement that you will like considerably less than the peripheral IV I'm offering you right now. Then send me a doctor who can handle it, doctor. Sinclair is in emergency surgery. Dr. Okonkwo is managing 2 critical patients in the unit. You have me, Colonel. She held his gaze without blinking. So I'll ask you one more time. Right arm. Briggs's jaw tightened. His eyes were calculating now rather than dismissive, the way a man recalibrates when the terrain shifts unexpectedly. You think because you work in a building with good air conditioning you understand pressure? His voice had dropped to something quieter and more dangerous. You think because you've read my chart you have any idea what you're dealing with? I know what's in your chart, Neva said. I know what it doesn't say. Something flickered behind his iron eyes. He did not respond. I know you haven't slept more than 2 hours at a stretch since you were admitted, she continued, checking the tubing on the IV line without looking away from her task. I know the night staff has documented you sitting upright at 0300, 0400, and again at 0530. I know that when the floor cleaner ran his buffer past your door 2 nights ago, you were standing against the far wall with your back to the corner before the sound fully registered. She paused. I know what that is, Colonel. I know what it costs. The room was very quiet. Briggs stared at the ceiling. A muscle worked in the hinge of his jaw. Get out, he said finally. The words were low and controlled and carried the weight of a man who was used to being obeyed. Get out of my room. Send me someone else. Send me someone who hasn't spent their career in a place like this. Someone who earned something with their hands instead of a degree from a comfortable institution. My men bled out in the dirt of Ramadi while people like you were studying for finals. Don't stand in my room and tell me you know what it costs. You don't know a thing. Neva was still. She set the IV tubing down carefully on the sterile field. She did not move toward the door. Sergeant First Class Demarion Webb, she said. The name hit the room like a stone dropped into still water. Briggs went completely motionless. His eyes snapped to her face. Specialist Tomas Argueta, Neva continued. Her voice had not changed in pitch or volume. It was still the measured professional tone of a clinician delivering information. But something underneath it had shifted. Staff Sergeant Cleo Pittman. Corporal Kwame Asante. Briggs's hands, resting on the bedsheet, had gone very white at the knuckles. How? He said. The word came out stripped of its usual armor, reduced to a single syllable of raw disorientation. How do you know those names? Neva reached up to her right arm. She did not unfasten her scrub top. She did not make a production of it. She simply pushed the short sleeve up past her shoulder with the matter-of-fact ease of someone who has done the same gesture 10,000 times. And for a moment, the only sound in the room was the steady electronic pulse of Briggs's cardiac monitor. The tattoo covered most of her upper arm. It was not decorative. It was the kind of ink that means something specific. The caduceus of the medical corps, but rendered in the angular, uncompromising style of a military unit patch. Coiled around the staff was a serpent with a striking quality that civilian tattoo artists rarely managed. Beneath the symbol, in small, precise block lettering that had faded slightly with time, 75th Ranger Regiment, 2nd Battalion, Bagram Mosul Ramadi, and below that 4 names arranged in a vertical column like a manifest, like a roll call that never got answered. Webb, Argueta, Pittman, Asante. The silence in room 412 was the kind that has weight. Briggs stared at the tattoo. His mouth opened slightly, then closed. The iron in his eyes was dissolving into something far more complicated and far more human. I was the medic attached to Ode 525 for 14 months, Neva said. She lowered her sleeve with the same quiet efficiency with which she had raised it. I was 22 years old and I had been in country for 6 weeks when your unit rolled out of Phobe Corregidor on the Ramadi push in November 2006. I was the one in the back of the second vehicle. She paused. I was the one who kept Demarion Webb breathing for 40 minutes in the back of a striker that was taking fire from 3 directions. I was the one who made the call on Tomas Argueta. The last sentence landed differently than the others. It landed the way those sentences always land, not with a bang but with a subsidence, the way ground gives way beneath your feet. Briggs's voice, when it came, was almost unrecognizable from the commanding rasp he had used moments before. You made the call. Yes, you were 22. Yes, he closed his eyes. The hand lying on the bedsheet moved almost imperceptibly, the fingers curling slightly inward. I always thought it was the surgeon at Balad who, Argueta, didn't make it to Balad, Neva said. He didn't make it out of the vehicle. I was with him. She held his gaze steadily, without apology and without performance. He wasn't alone. The cardiac monitor beeped its steady rhythm. Somewhere down the corridor, a phone rang twice and went silent. The morning light coming through the narrow window of room 412 was the pale winter kind, thin and honest, with nowhere to hide. Harlan Briggs, decorated officer, 31-year veteran of the United States Army, a man who had commanded men through 3 deployments and 2 wars, and carried the specific, suffocating weight of every one of their faces. That man turned his head slowly away from Neva Harlow and looked at the wall, and then his shoulders dropped. It was barely visible, a fraction of an inch. But Neva had been watching people carry unbearable things for long enough to recognize the moment when they set them down. I sent them into that intersection, Briggs said. His voice was rough in a different way now. Not the deliberate roughness of command, but the involuntary roughness of something that had been locked in a chest for years and was only now finding the air. I had the drone feed. I reviewed it twice. I gave the all clear, and the SIGINT team had flagged that block 36 hours earlier. His jaw moved. I dismissed it. I thought it was a ghost red. I had a window and I used it, and I sent 4 men into an ambush I should have seen. You didn't dismiss it, Neva said. Briggs looked at her sharply. I was there, Harlow. So was I. She pulled the rolling stool from beside the sink and sat down, not at a careful professional distance, but close, the way you sit when you want someone to hear you without a room's worth of space between the words. The SIGINT flag was a ghost red. The subsequent analysis confirmed it. The signature matched a cell phone on a frequency the insurgent network in that sector had stopped using 4 months earlier. Battalion G2 cleared it at 0200 the morning of the operation. That clearance was in the after-action report. She paused, which was classified at the brigade level and didn't enter the regimental record until 2015. Briggs stared at her. That report was classified. I know. I requested it through my VA advocate in 2017. Her voice was measured but not detached. There was something in it that cost something to say. I needed to know too, Colonel. I needed to know if I missed something in the vehicle. If there was a call I could have made differently. If I could have. She stopped. She looked at her hands for a moment, at the purple nitrile gloves she was still wearing, before looking back up. The G2 clearance was clean. The intersection was clear on every available red. You sent them through a legitimate window with legitimate intelligence. What happened in that block was not a failure of your judgment. The silence stretched long enough that the building seemed to breathe around it. Tomas was telling me about his daughter, Briggs said very quietly. 2 days before. He had a photograph in his chest pocket. She was 3 years old. She was wearing a yellow hat. His voice did not break. It simply thinned the way metal thins under sustained heat. I have thought about that yellow hat every single day for 18 years. Her name is Camille, Neva said. Briggs looked up. I found her in 2019. Neva's voice was careful now, carrying the specific tenderness of someone handling something irreplaceable. I found her mother through the Gold Star family network. Camille is 21 now. She goes to University of Texas. She's studying civil engineering. She has her father's eyes. A pause. Her mother told me that Tomas used to say the most important structures in the world were the ones that kept people from falling. Harlan Briggs made a sound that was not quite a word. Neva gave him the time it required. She did not fill the silence. She did not offer comfort in the form of words that would have required him to perform gratitude he wasn't ready to perform. She simply sat beside him and let the information settle, the way a medic waits after a tourniquet. Not hovering, not withdrawing, just present while the body does what it needs to do. After a long while, Briggs raised his right arm from the bed. He extended it toward her. Not the gesture of a man complying with a nurse's instruction, but something more deliberate. Something that meant something else. Neva picked up the IV line without a word. She found the vein on the first try, which she always did, and taped it with the practiced efficiency of someone for whom the motion was as natural as breathing. She unclamped the line and watched the drip chamber for a moment to confirm the flow. Demarion Webb is in Savannah, she said, not looking up from the IV site. He coaches youth football on weekends. His left arm has about 60% mobility, but he says the kids don't care as long as he can still throw a spiral, which apparently he can. She allowed the faintest shade of something into her voice. He asked about you. Last year. He asked if I had ever come across Colonel Briggs. Briggs was quiet for a moment. What did you tell him? I told him you were still fighting. He looked at her. I told him that was what you did, she said simply. I told him it was what all of you did. Over the following 10 days, room 412 became a different place. The ceftriaxone did what it was designed to do, beating back the infection with the blunt mechanical efficiency of modern pharmacology. Briggs's temperature normalized by the 3rd day. His white count dropped steadily. By day 7, The attending physician reviewed his morning labs with the careful optimism of a man who had been prepared for a considerably worse outcome. The nursing staff noticed the change before the physicians did. Petra Gaines mentioned it to the charge nurse on the second morning, quietly, in the manner of someone reporting something anomalous. The man in 412 had said, "Thank you," when the orderly brought his breakfast. He had apologized to Specialist Tillman, unprompted, for the incident with the tray on the first day. He had been found on 2 separate mornings, sitting in the chair beside his bed, with the door open instead of bolted against the corridor's sounds. He still called Neva Harlow. She still called him Colonel. The ward understood instinctively that this was not a formality but a form of respect with its own specific grammar. On the morning of his discharge, Neva was finishing her charting at the nurse's station when Petra appeared at her shoulder and said simply, "He's asking for you." She found Briggs standing beside his bed, dressed in civilian clothes, dark trousers, a plain gray shirt, a jacket with a small American flag pin on the lapel. He was holding a manila envelope. He looked like himself, or rather, he looked like what himself had always been beneath the layers of pain and hostility, and the particular armor that men like him construct over years of watching the people around them not come home. "I have something for you," he said. He held out the envelope. Neva took it. Inside was a single sheet of paper, photocopied, the edges slightly grainy, a copy of a document she had never seen before. At the top, in military header format, Department of the Army. Recommendation for commendation. Specialist Neva R. Harlow, 75th Ranger Regiment, attach medical specialist. Dated November 14, 2006. She read the first paragraph. Then she stopped reading and looked up. "That was submitted to Regimental Command 9 days after Ramadi," Briggs said. "I wrote it myself. It was denied at the brigade level because of the classification issues around the after action. They didn't want any documentation that implicitly referenced the operation circulating outside of secured channels." His voice was even, but the effort of evenness was visible. "It was never rescinded. It was simply buried. I have been trying to have it reinstated through official channels for 4 years. He paused. "I have better lawyers now. I wanted you to know it existed." Neva looked at the paper for a long moment. Then she set it carefully back in the envelope. "You didn't have to do that," she said. "I know." He picked up his bag from the chair beside the bed. "Webb is driving up from Savannah next month. He wants to buy you a meal," he said, and I am quoting directly, "that you are the toughest person he has ever shared a vehicle with, and that is a category that includes people who have been shot at for a living." Something in Briggs's expression shifted slightly. Not quite a smile, but the structural possibility of one. I told him he was probably right. Neva walked him to the discharge desk. They did not speak in the elevator. In the lobby, Briggs stopped at the glass doors, the winter sunlight falling through them in long, pale oblongs across the polished floor. He turned back to her. He was quiet for a moment. "Arguida's daughter," he said. "Camille?" "Yes, is she?" He stopped. He tried again. "Is she all right?" "The way she's." Another pause. "Is she doing well, actually?" "She is," Neva said. "Her mother says she laughs like him. She says you can hear it down the hall." Briggs looked at the floor. He nodded once, slowly, the way a man accepts information that he has needed for a very long time. When he looked up, there were 6 people standing in the lobby that Neva had not seen come in. They stood in a loose arrangement near the entrance, and she recognized the particular quality of their stillness before she registered anything else about them. The stillness of people who had learned to occupy space quietly, who had spent years in environments where being noticed could mean not coming home. Some wore civilian clothes. One wore a battered leather jacket with a unit patch on the sleeve that Neva would have recognized anywhere. Two used canes. One had a prosthetic right hand half concealed in the pocket of his jacket. They were various ages, various sizes, and they all looked at Neva with the same expression. The particular expression of people who have been carrying a specific gratitude for a long time and have not known where to put it. Demarion Webb was standing at the back of the group. His left arm hung at a slightly unnatural angle, but his eyes were exactly as she remembered them from the back of a striker in the November dark 18 years ago. Alert and direct and entirely without pretense. He gave her a nod. Just one. The kind that carries everything. "We didn't plan this as a formal thing," Briggs said quietly beside her. "They came because they wanted to. I made some calls. Some of them drove through the night." He paused. "You should know, the ones who couldn't be here sent word. I have 37 messages on my phone, some from men who hadn't spoken to me in years." Neva looked at the assembled veterans of Ode 525. Her throat tightened in a way she did not fight and did not hide. Webb stepped forward. He extended his right hand, and when she took it, he held it for a moment in both of his, the mechanical one and the real one, with a steadiness that had nothing to do with grip strength. "You stayed," he said. It was not a question and not an accusation. It was something more like an acknowledgement of a fact that had taken years to name. "When it was the worst thing it could possibly be, you stayed. So did all of you," Neva said. Behind Webb, Briggs spoke, not loudly, not in his command voice, but in the quiet that had settled over the lobby. Patients and visitors and hospital staff unconsciously stilling around the edges of something they could sense was significant. His voice carried clearly, attention. The veterans of Odia 525 came to attention the way people do when it is no longer a military habit but a personal one, without performance, without hesitation, with a precision that had nothing to do with regulation and everything to do with meaning. Even Briggs, standing on a leg that had not fully healed, straightened to his full height. And then, in the pale winter light of the lobby of the Dwight D. Eisenhower Army Medical Center, 6 men raised their right hands in a salute to a woman who held no rank above them, who wore no uniform, who had nothing on her badge but the name Harlow and the unit designation of a floor nurse in Ward 4 East. They were not saluting a rank. They were not observing a protocol. They were returning, after 18 years, what she had given them in the dark. The only currency that actually matters between people who have stood together at the edge of things. Neva straightened. She raised her hand, and she brought them home.